It's time to break down the Buffalo Bills Week 11 opponent, the challenges they present, and what the Bills need to do to deal with them today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Wednesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. Well, folks, I know a lot of you are looking forward to turning the page away from the Minnesota Vikings and into the Bills' next game. And so here we are. It's time for the comprehensive primer for the Bills' Week 11 matchup. And in Week 11, the Bills are back at home for a date with the Cleveland Browns. The game will be played on Sunday, November 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park, New York. The game will be broadcasted on CBS. Andrew Catalon is on the play-by-play. And very unfortunately, James Lofton is the game analyst with Amanda Renner as the sideline reporter. And folks, you can do no worse than James Lofton as a game analyst. He is as bad as it gets in terms of talking through games live, and his lack of football acumen leads to very minimal replays. And so just have your expectations in the right place, because this is not going to be pretty. James Lofton struggles, and I've watched a lot of football, and every time James Lofton is on the call, I come away very disappointed in what that looks like. I know he's a great player and all that type of stuff, but this man is a game analyst. Oh, it's not good. And it's very unfortunate that we have to suffer through that on Sunday afternoon. This will be the 23rd all-time meeting between the Bills and the Browns. The Bills have a 9-13 all-time record against Cleveland. Of course, the last meeting coming in 2019. The Browns beat the Bills 19-16. The Bills enter this game 6-3. Browns are 3-6. 3 wins came against the Panthers, and my goodness, they stole one. Let me just tell you that. The Panthers kind of got hosed in that game. The Steelers and Bengals and their 6 losses came to the Jets, Falcons, Chargers, Patriots, Ravens, and Dolphins. They've lost 5 of their last 6 ball games. Now, one of the big storylines for this game is going to be the weather. Snow is coming to Western New York, and it looks like it's starting on Thursday and then into Friday and Saturday and even into Sunday potentially. Currently, weather.com is calling for 27 degrees, 10 to 20 mile an hour winds, and a 40% chance of snow during the game. We'll see how it goes. You know, I think the snowstorm will kind of be ending on Sunday, and it starts on Thursday. So we'll see how long it actually goes, and if there's an impact. I think the greatest impact could come due to people kind of traveling into the game and trying to get into town more so than it will be impacting the actual football game. And against a Cleveland team here that lives and dies by running the football with Nick Chubb, which we'll talk all about here in just a moment. You know, I think they'd love nothing more than for it to be a slippery, snowy surface on Sunday afternoon. Head coach of the Cleveland Browns is Kevin Stefanski. He's 40 years old. He's in his 3rd season as head coach of the Browns. In 2020, they went 11-5 and actually won a playoff game that year. Last season, they were 8-9, and then this year so far, they're 3-6. So overall, he's 22-20, 1-1 in the playoffs. Prior to becoming the head coach of the Browns, he's only ever coached for one other NFL team, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. He was there for a long time, from 2006 through 2019 in Minnesota, and he had a bunch of different titles: offensive assistant, assistant quarterbacks coach, tight ends coach, running backs coach, quarterbacks coach, and then he was their offensive coordinator for 1 year in 2019, And then he was the Browns head coach starting in 2020, and he obviously currently holds that job. He worked for Brad Childress initially, and then Leslie Frazier and Mike Zimmer in terms of the head coaches he worked under during his time in Minnesota. So far, Kevin Stefanski has challenged 12 plays and won 7 of them. So he's 7-5 on challenges. The quarterback for the Cleveland Browns on Sunday is Jacoby Brissett. He's been their starter all year as Deshaun Watson is serving his suspension. I think he's got one more game after this one, Tampa next week, and then he comes back for the Houston game. And so no Deshaun Watson for Cleveland. It'll be Jacoby Brissett, who's been their starter all year. Let's talk about him. 6'4", 235 pounds. He's 29 years old. Was a third-round pick back in 2016 out of North Carolina State by the New England Patriots. He spent 1 year with the Patriots and then went to the Colts, the Dolphins, and then the Browns. So he's been on 4 teams so far in his NFL career. He's found a way to start 46 games. And in those 46 games, the team that he quarterbacks is 17-29. So far in 2022, he's completing 63.8% of his passes, 230 yards passing per game, 8 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a passer rating of 87.1. Let's take a deeper dive into Brissett's 2022 metrics. His average time to throw is 2.9 seconds. That's 27th in the NFL. He is a player that will hold on to the football. And one thing that's going to be pretty interesting as we kind of talk through this is wondering why he's holding on to the football, because there's usually a relationship between all these statistics that tell a story, that give you an idea of stylistically what type of quarterback you're going up against. And for Brissett, he makes it kind of challenging. So let's talk about it. Again, 2.9 seconds is average time to throw, 27th in the NFL. 42% of the time he gets it out in under 2.5, 58% over 2.5. When he does get it out under 2.5, he completes 71% of his passes, 6.1 yards per attempt, passer rating of 98.4. When he holds onto it, which he does most of the time, completes 59% of his passes, and his passer rating is only 79. And so this is the type of quarterback that you kind of want him to you want to force him, to exhaust progressions and make him hold on to the football, because he's less effective as he holds on to it. His average depth of target so far this year is 9.3, which is 6th in the NFL. Now, this is where things get interesting to me, because we talked about him being a quarterback that holds on to the football. Typically, when you hold on to the football, it's to work the ball down the field. Well, not really happening that often for Jacoby Brissett. 12.4% of his attempts are 20-plus down the field. That's right in the middle of the pack, 15th in the NFL. And when he does dial up the deep ball, which is, again, targeting a receiver 20 yards or more down the field, he's 13 of 36, 455 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, and a passer rating of 53.9. And that passer rating of 53.9 on deep throws is 30th in the NFL. So usually there's a relationship between successful downfield passing and a high volume of downfield passing for a guy that's holding onto the football for nearly 3 seconds on average, but that's not necessarily been the case for Jacoby Brissett. Play action. This is a number that I thought would be a lot higher. They're only running play action on 22.6% of dropbacks. That is 22nd in the NFL. And he's a quarterback that is better with play action. 106 passer rating with play action and 82 without play action. So you would think a run-heavy team like Cleveland would want to incorporate that a little bit more. Well, they haven't. Screens, not a big part of what they do. 8.9% of Brissett's passes are screens. That's 19th in the NFL. And then, of course, the pressure splits. We got to talk about this. When Jacoby Brissett is kept clean, he completes 71% of his passes, 7.4 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 102.2. When you get pressure on him, the completion percentage goes down to 44.7, and the passer rating comes down to 44.5. So you lose 26% in completion percentage and 57.7 points in passer rating. So this guy's going to hold on to the football. And that's going to make it easier for you to get pressure because you have more time to get to the quarterback, and he struggles under pressure. So a good opportunity here for this Bills defensive line to affect the quarterback and obviously make him a whole lot less effective because he's under pressure. This is, once again, another critical week to get heat on the quarterback. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car that you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts. You can browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and coming soon to Australia. You can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. You can get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. You can even find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and you just need to get from A to B. You can also test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits into your everyday life. And what's awesome is that many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. All right, let's talk a little bit more about this Browns offense that is coordinated by Alex Van Pelt. You know him, 52 years old, third season in Cleveland as the Browns offensive coordinator and former Buffalo Bills backup quarterback. Y'all remember him, right? Alex Van Pelt. So after he got done playing in the NFL, he began his career coaching with the Bills, actually. He was the Bills quality control coach from 2006 to 2007, the Bills quarterbacks coach in 2008, and then he was actually the Bills offensive coordinator in 2009. And then he didn't become a coordinator again until 2020. Yeah, so it was 11 years between opportunities to be a offensive coordinator. So after he was the Bills OC in 2009, he was the Bucs quarterbacks coach from 2010 through 2011. He went to Green Bay, and he was there for a while, 2012 through 2017. He was the running backs coach and then the quarterbacks coach. And then he went to Cincinnati to be their quarterbacks coach from 2018 to 2019, and then Cleveland's offensive coordinator since 2020. So far in 2022, they are scoring 24 points per game. That's 10th. 41% on third down. That's 12th. 61% scoring touchdowns in the red zone. That is 10th. 375 yards per game. That's 5th. 158 rushing yards per game. That's 5th. And 217 passing yards per game. That is 20th. Let's take a look at this personnel that Cleveland has on offense. At wide receiver, their three main guys are Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and David Bell. Amari Cooper, you should be well familiar with him, one of the premier players at receiver in the NFL, started his career with the Raiders, then to the Cowboys, and then they just traded him this offseason to the Browns. He's a good player, good route runner, a threat to all levels of the field, and a player that I think is legitimately a number one receiver in the NFL. And so I think he's a really outstanding player that, challenges you with outstanding route runner. Yeah, he's really good at creating separation and kind of manipulating coverage and getting himself open. Now, I think he's minimized a bit with a player like Jacoby Brissett. That's not a very on-schedule type player, and so that takes away from a guy like an Amari Cooper. But, he's still a very dangerous player that deserves a lot of attention for the Bills on defense when he's on the field, which should be just about every play. The number 2 in Cleveland is Donovan Peoples-Jones, third-year player out of Michigan. I think he's been pretty solid. I like what he can become. I think there's some parallels to him and Gabriel Davis stylistically as a player, size, ball skills down the field. DPJ is a much more explosive player than Gabe, but that type of style of play where you get some physicality and some size and some toughness and some ball skills down the field. And, I think that he will continue to evolve as a player, and he's kind of having his best season so far, and I think he's still got a lot of good football ahead of him. And then their slot player, third receiver, if you will, is David Bell, rookie out of Purdue. I really like David Bell. I think he will benefit a lot from Deshaun Watson coming back. Another really good route runner, really good hands. He's just not super dynamic or explosive. And so for him, it's that ability to create that separation at the top of routes and really win the football that makes him effective. And again, a non-on-schedule player like Jacoby Brissett takes away from how effective he can be. But, there's a lot to like about those three receivers. I mean, maybe you wish you had a more I don't know if the word's dynamic, but you had a more potent wide receiver too, a more do everything type player. But I kind of like these guys. But again, I think they're minimized by Brissett. At running back, they got who I believe is the best running back in the game. It's Nick Chubb. I will say that I don't think it's particularly close. If you ask me who the best running back in the game is, it's Nick Chubb, and that's just being a pure runner. Maybe he's not an elite receiving talent, but my goodness, in terms of pure running the football, Nick Chubb is phenomenal. Just a really good player. I love his pace. I mean, he hits the hole with a lot of conviction, and he's got a very low center of gravity, a lot of strength. I mean, just unbelievable power in his lower half and through his core. I spent some time around Nick Chubb when he was at Georgia, and I was blown away by him. Just the way he carried himself throughout practice. I was there for a couple of days of practice, and him on the practice field, he looked like a pro. He's one of those guys that, I've watched a lot of practices in my life, and Nick Chubb was just one of those guys that you knew was a dude, and everything that he did was intentional, focused, and was just a true leader out there. And then you saw the way that his teammates interacted with him. I observed him kind of just in the facility, and everything about him just was like a pro's pro, and just a true leader and just a friggin' good football player. Man, I have so much respect for him. I wish the Bills weren't playing him this week, because I think he's going to present a lot of problems. Just a very nuanced runner, good vision, good power, good burst, and his ability to kind of string together moves and navigate space, I mean, is the best in the league. So he's a real challenge for Buffalo on Sunday. And of course, they got a great backup running back in Kareem Hunt, which would be a starter for 75% of the league. Really good, multifaceted back. So two really good running backs that they have there. Tight ends, David Njoku is a really good player, very explosive, maybe one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. He didn't play last week against Miami. I'm not sure what his status for this week is going to be, but that's something to monitor, because I think he's one of their more dynamic playmakers on offense, and they would certainly love to have him. They signed him to a new contract extension, and he's one of those guys that can legitimately challenge the seam and can win after the catch and put a lot of stress on a defense. And so if they have him, that's going to be a big boost for their offense. If not, they'll have Harrison Bryant, who's a young player of kind of a solid tight end too. You're never going to want him to be your starter, but for a team like Cleveland that wants to run a lot of 12 personnel, Harrison Bryant's a very good complement to David Njoku. Now let's look at this offensive line. They've got a really good offensive line. Their left tackle is Jedrick Wills, third-year player out of Alabama, top 10 pick. I think he's been okay. I don't know that he's necessarily been a dominant player like they wanted him to be when they drafted him. But making a switch from right tackle to left tackle and playing in an offense that is really a downhill power rushing attack, I think is been an adjustment for him. And I think he's maybe put on a little weight, and he's been challenged in new ways, but I think he's been okay, but maybe not the dominant player they thought they were getting when they drafted him in the top 10. Their left guard is Joel Bitonio, one of the best offensive linemen in the game, has been for a number of years. He's powerful. He's good in pass pro. He gets out in space. He's an exceptional football player. Their center is Ethan Pochik. Started his career in Seattle, has started a lot of games. He's having a good year for Cleveland. I think he's a solid starting center for this football team. Their right guard, Wyatt Teller, former Buffalo Bill. You guys remember him. Draft pick, played a little bit for the Bills during that rookie season, and then Brandon Beane traded him away. And Wyatt Teller has become one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. Phenomenal talent. Just got a huge extension with Cleveland. He's a big part of their identity as a football team. We'll see if he can play. He tried to play through a calf injury last week against the Dolphins, and during the first quarter, he left the game. And so I'm not sure what his status is going to be, but, I can tell you that he tried to play and didn't get outside of the first quarter. And then the right tackle is Jack Conklin, who's a rock-solid right tackle and has been for a number of years in the NFL. So really, really good offensive line. I don't look at this group and say, wow, there's your chance. That's the guy you can have your way with. I think their weakest links are going to be, first of all, whoever plays right guard. If it's not Wyatt Teller, that could be Hijalte Froholt or Drew Forbes. Either one of those guys you should be able to take advantage of. And then Jedrick Wills, I think he's a player that has a lot of potential, but I don't know that he's been super consistent. And I know that he had some struggles last week with the Dolphins edge rushers. And so, I think that's kind of your other opportunity, if there is one, against this offensive line. So what are my keys for the Bills on defense against this Browns offense? I've got 4 things written down. The first one is be ready for big boy football. This is a gap rushing offense with big physical offensive linemen and elite running back. And they're going to stress your run defense. They're going to want to get after you with their rushing game. And they've got 2 great backs. I mean, they've got another back that I think can play as well in Dearness Johnson. I think Jerome Ford's a nice rookie running back. So they've got depth on top of depth at running back, and they got some physical dudes up front, and they're a productive rushing offense and have been. So different, like very stylistically different than Minnesota with their wide zone and Dalvin Cook. This is going to be a lot more straight ahead. Maybe a little bit more resembling the type of rushing offenses the Bills face against New England, right? That style, introducing extra gaps, short pulls, pin and pull type stuff. And Nick Chubb's as good as it gets. Absolutely as good as it gets. Number 2 is get heat on Jacoby Brissett. He's going to hold it, and that's going to give your rush a chance to get there. And you want to affect that guy because under pressure and when he holds onto the football, he struggles. And the good news is he does those 2 things. So another week for your defensive line to really impact the quarterback, and that go a long way in winning a football game. Number 3 is run to the ball. Run to the ball. This defense, there needs to be 11 guys playing with reckless abandon, getting after the football. All right, Nick Chubb, I'm sure I've given him enough flowers here on this podcast, but I'm going to give him a few more right now. 611 of the 904 rushing yards that Nick Chubb has this year came after contact. 611 of the 904 rushing yards he has this year came after contact. For a Bills defense that doesn't tackle well, this is the ultimate challenge. This is that dude that can really make your defense look silly if you don't get to the football and get him on the ground. And it's going to take multiple people to get there, to get him down consistently, and really kind of take that element of their offense away and force them to throw the football. Nick Chubb's forced 54 tackles this season. That's the most in the NFL. Get 11 men to the football with urgency. Number 4 is be willing to adjust your fronts. This is a gap rushing offense. Predetermined tracks. There's an objective in creating a hole for the football to be run through against a team like this. And I think switching up your fronts, giving them different looks, go bare front. I don't care. Do different things to throw off what they think they're going to get and how they're going to have to block, and stress their communication. But you want to have bodies in the box this week. If Jacoby Brissett hits a throw down the field to Donovan Peoples-Jones, okay. We can live with that a whole lot more than Nick Chubb's just snatching your soul for 60 minutes on Sunday afternoon. You got to find a way to slow down this rushing offense. And I think that comes from the things we talked about. Run to the football and being willing to adjust your fronts. And even, look, go 3 linebackers. You're going to have to do some things this week to stop the run, because this is as big of a challenge as you're going to find in the NFL in terms of powerful run blockers and a dominant running back. So there you have it. Those are my keys for the Bills defense against this Browns offense. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can create a free job post in just minutes over at LinkedIn Jobs, and you can reach the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. I love the simple tools that you can find over at LinkedIn. They have screening questions to make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball, soccer, and esports, we've got it all over at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well over at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. All right, let's talk about this Cleveland Browns defense. This has been a problem for this team so far this year. The coordinator is Joe Woods, not a very popular guy right now in Cleveland. 52 years old, third season with the Browns, has 5 years of experience as an NFL defensive coordinator. So these 3 with the Browns and then 2 with Denver back in 2017 through 2018. His journey to becoming a defensive coordinator started back in 2004 when he was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he was a DB coach in Tampa, Minnesota, and the Raiders from 2004 through 2016 before becoming a defensive coordinator. And yes, that did include time with Leslie Frazier in Minnesota. So a lot of like odd connections here between Alex Van Pelt, Joe Woods, not Leslie Frazier, but just different people that are connected between these two organizations. Wyatt Teller, Corey Bojorquez is the Browns punter. So there's a lot of that type of stuff going on here. The Browns on defense this year, they're allowing 26 points per game. That's the second most in the NFL. They're 31st. 349 yards per game, that's 16th. 131 rushing yards per game, that's 23rd. 218 passing yards per game, that's 19th. They are 50% on defense on third down, that's 17th. 59% red zone, so that's 20th. So a very below average defense here statistically. Let's talk about the personnel here. On the defensive line at defensive tackle, this is a very poor group of defensive tackles. And this really stems from their draft picks haven't worked out. It's a little bit, I'll say it, it's a little bit like what the Bills have done at defensive end. And Gregory Rousseau is not included in this, but kind of investing picks in AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham and them not working out is just kind of like what's happened here with Cleveland, except for the Browns don't have the hedge like the Bills do. The Bills have Greg Rousseau, who's hitting, he's been a great pick for the Bills. And of course, Von Miller. Imagine if the Bills had to start AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham as the defensive ends. That's kind of what's happening in Cleveland. So they have Jordan Elliott, Tommy Togiai, Perrion Winfrey, Taven Bryan. And that might be as bad of a defensive tackle quartet as you'll find in the NFL. And it shows in kind of the challenges that they have stopping the run and getting pressure on the quarterback outside of Myles Garrett. So this is obviously a big need for them to address, but also a very big limiting factor right now for their defense. These guys are all like Jordan Elliott, Tommy Togiai, Perrion Winfrey, talking about like third, fourth round picks, the guys that they need to be good rotational players, and they're not, right? And they have to start. So it's a problem for this defense. On the edge, they have another problem, and that's for the other team, and his name is Myles Garrett. Just an unbelievable player, number 1 overall pick a few years ago. He's been extended. He's special, right? He's a special football player. Can win with speed, power. He's flexible. One of those guys that just checks every box and it doesn't make sense. He's a unicorn. He's one of those freak players, and he gives me a lot of concern. And I know the Bills have a good left tackle in Deion Dawkins, but Myles Garrett is going to give any left tackle trouble, and so the Bills will have to really come up with a plan to stop one of the elite pass rushers in the game. Their other edge player is Jadeveon Clowney. I know that there's a lot of wide-ranging opinions out there about Clowney. I'm not his biggest fan. I know that he's athletic and they can kind of unleash him and tap into his size and power, but as a traditional player, I think he's kind of been a disappointment, and they kind of have to scheme up opportunities for him to make an impact. And then their guys behind Clowney and Garrett are a couple of rookies, and Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas, mid-round guys. At linebacker, looks like Deion Jones, who they recently traded for from the Falcons, and Sione Takitaki will probably be their two guys at linebacker. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, good-looking second-year player. He didn't play against Miami. Not sure what his status will be for this week. But Jones and Takitaki have played a lot of football. Takitaki's played a lot of football for the Browns this year, so they got some guys that are familiar, but I'm not sure there's an impact player here at linebacker for the Browns. At corner, they're getting a little bit healthier. They got Denzel Ward back, and he's a really good cornerback. Top 5 pick a few years ago. Signed an extension with the Browns. He's a good player working back from injury. And then opposite of him has been Martin Emerson, who's a rookie this year, and he's really caught my eye. I've been impressed by watching Martin Emerson. He's very, very competitive. He's got that dog in him. He tackles and really competes. So a young player that I think you can take advantage of a little bit, but I think he's played with a lot of confidence and looks like he's going to be a steal for them. And then their first-round pick from last year, Greg Newsome, plays in the slot and a bit out wide, and I think he's a good football player, but I think he's still trying to find some consistency in the NFL. But a lot of talent there in Ward and Newsome. They also have Greedy Williams as a player that could be sprinkled in, so they got some depth there, but I think they've had some challenges collectively this year. At safety, they've got some good names here. I'm not sure they've played very effectively this year. John Johnson, who's had some really good years in the NFL. I think he's only been okay this year. Grant Delpit, who's been very flashy but inconsistent in the NFL. And then Ronnie Harmon. Sometimes they'll do some 3 safety stuff, and he was a former pick for the Jaguars out of Alabama, kind of a solid player that they sprinkle in here on this defense. So I got some names there in the secondary, but I'm not sure they're playing well together yet at this point this season. They've had a lot of injuries, and I think that makes it a little bit challenging. But when you look at this defense, it's about that guy, Myles Garrett. That's the guy that can wreck your game. All right, so what are my keys for the Bills on offense against the Browns defense? Real shocker here for number one. Take care of the football, right? I think that's the biggest problem with the Bills. I think there's so many conversations about the Buffalo Bills that we're having right now that are, I don't want to say unnecessary, but they're elevated to a level of extreme concern as a symptom to the biggest problem, which is just taking care of the football. And it's not that the Bills are turnover prone. It's that they turn over the football at the highest rate in the NFL. 19% of the Bills' offensive drives end in a turnover. That's ridiculous. And so the Bills have lost 3 games by a combined 8 points while turning over the football at the highest clip in the NFL. You fix that, I think this team's going to be just fine. Just fine. They're top 3 in total yards on offense. They're 3rd in scoring and number 1 in yards on offense while doing this. Like, guys, I get it. Like, the running game could be better. They could play better situational football on offense. They could have better plans in the second half on offense. Their pass rush can be better. I get it. They could tackle better. But if they just didn't turn over the ball at the highest clip in the NFL, we're probably talking about a undefeated or 1-loss football team. I think it really is that simple. I really do. And look, like I said, I think yesterday on the podcast, I have a sample size of the Bills not being the most turnover-prone team in the NFL. They were middle of the pack the last 2 years. If they can trend in that direction, they're going to be fine. All right. But anyways, take care of the football. The Bills went from a 17% turnover rate to a 19% turnover rate. So we're not trending in the right direction after the Minnesota game. The good news, I guess, is they're playing the Browns, who don't really get any turnovers. Only 3 interceptions so far this year, 8 total takeaways. They only get a turnover on 8% of the drives that they face so far this year. That's 5th lowest in the NFL. Number 2 is Myles Garrett. This is the guy that can wreck your game. So whatever you got to do, chipping, doubling, whatever it is, don't let Myles Garrett ruin your game. And certainly, look, with Josh Allen and he's kind of a tender elbow right now, keep that guy away from 17. So have your plan for Myles Garrett. And then number 3, stick with the run. It's a bad interior defensive line. They got small linebackers. Go after these guys. The Browns are allowing nearly 5 yards per carry, 4.8 yards per carry this year, 5th highest in the NFL. Stick with the damn run game. Stick with it. The Bills are up 17, 3 possessions against Minnesota in the second half last week and just didn't run the ball. You got to run the ball. You should be able to do it against this defense. Real quick on special teams, their kicker is a rookie. Cade York was a 4th-round pick out of LSU. He's 15 of 19 this year on field goals, 20 of 22 on extra points. And he's got a huge leg. I think he's got the potential to be an elite NFL kicker, but he had a little lull here to start the year. He's missed some kicks, and so I think you're kind of wondering how he's going to bounce back. And I think you always do that with young kickers. When you start missing a few kicks, psychologically, can they respond, to it? And I think Cade, I know a colleague of mine, Keith Sanchez, at the Draft Network, was part of the LSU program, was a director of personnel there for a number of years, and he raves about Cade York, and so I'm sure he's got a lot of talent. He's just got to find that consistency that you would expect with a young player in the NFL. Their punter is Corey Bojorquez. You know all about this guy, right? Big booming leg, a little bit of an inconsistent holder, and he certainly have his shanks, but he's having a good year. And ever since he's left Buffalo, he's been a punter in the NFL with Green Bay and now with Cleveland. And their return situation is a little bit unsettled. Their kick returner is Jerome Ford, who I think is a good player, but I don't know that he strikes a whole lot of fear into me as a kick returner. So I would definitely be willing to challenge him and make him bring it out. And then their punt return situation feels a little bit unsettled to me. It feels like lately it's been more Donovan Peoples-Jones, but I'm not sure that they have somebody that they love in that role to be the punt returner. So that's something to keep in mind. But I also hope the Bills don't punt. So there's that. One other quick note here on the special teams. The Browns are giving up 16 yards per punt return, which is by far the most in the NFL. And so Nyheim Hines could have some real opportunities on Sunday to win as a punt returner. And the Browns have struggled to cover punts this year. So that's just something to kind of file away in the back of your mind as you consider this game on Sunday afternoon. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Hey, remember MafiaMeals.com. Big shout out to Alyssa O'Reilly, who came onto the podcast yesterday and talked about the initiative that she's working on for Mafia Meals. So go to MafiaMeals.com. Would love it if you took a second to support that initiative in any way that you can, whether it's making a donation or showing up to the tailgate on Sunday ahead of Browns and Bills, and all those details you can find over at MafiaMeals.com. All right, folks, that's it for today. Tomorrow, crossover Thursday, I'll be joined by Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns to continue this conversation and getting ready for the Bills and Browns on Sunday afternoon. So don't miss it. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.